Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's get week 33 underway. It's the last week of series 4 of today's Tolkien Times with another Mailbag Monday. Now, as we near the end of our time in the tale of Cirion and Eorl in our Third Age Thursday readings, it's time for a question that I've been strategically holding on to. William A. wrote in asking a very simple question. If no one was supposed to climb Amon Anwar, why did they end up putting a beacon up there? Is the tomb of Elendil, where Cirion and Eorl swore their oaths, still there? Well, the short answer is no, it's no longer there, but that would be a pretty unexciting episode. So let's go ahead and look at why that is. To do that, we have to understand why it was put there in the first place. And that means diving into some details of the story in Unfinished Tales that I skipped last week. So, after the Prince of Dol Amroth noticed the Lambe Ando Lambe letters on the stone and asked the obvious question, Cirion explained what Isildur had said about putting the tomb here. For he said, "Here is the midpoint of the kingdom of the south, and here shall the memorial of Elendil the faithful abide in the keeping of the Valar while the kingdom endures. This hill shall be a hallow, and let no man disturb its peace and silence unless he be an heir of Elendil." Okay, if it's a hallow, why are we disturbing its peace and silence with a massive beacon fire? Well, we'll get to that, I promise. But first, it's that bit about the midpoint of the kingdom of the south that I skipped last time. There's a footnote there, and I want us to take a look. Amon Anwar was in fact the high place nearest to the center of a line from the inflow of the Limelight down to the southern cape of Tol Falas. Now, the Limelight is the river that flows east from northern Fangorn. It empties into the Anduin. It's the southern border of the Field of Celebrant. Now, that's the area that's to the southeast of Lothlorien. It's west of the Anduin, and it's where Eorl came to the rescue of Gondor. Now, due south of that, all the way down the bottom of Gondor, where the Anduin pours into the Bay of Belfalas, stands the island of Tol Falas. And if you draw a north-south line between those 2 points, it crosses the White Mountains closest to Halifirien, and yeah, it's almost exactly at the middle of that line. The footnote goes on, though. It says, and the distance from the Halifirien, to the fords of Isen was equal to its distance to Minas Tirith. Well, I don't know. When we look at the maps, that actually appears to be a little less than accurate, at least the maps drawn by Christopher Tolkien. The Halifirien appears to be about halfway between Minas Tirith and Edoras, or maybe Helm's Deep if we're stretching a little bit. But the fords of Isen are a bit further to the west-northwest than that, so the Halifirien isn't quite the midpoint of the east-west line, but it's definitely the midpoint of that north-south line, which represents the boundaries of Old Gondor, and that's why Isildur had the memorial of his father built here on Amon Anwar. But that's also why Cirion changed it up. Now, depending on how much of the story is left, we may or may not get to this exact part on Thursday, so I'm going to read it here in order to answer William's question. This is from the section, The Tradition of Isildur, at the end of the story of Cirion and Eorl. For it came to pass that Cirion, the 12th of the ruling stewards, was faced by a new and great danger. Invaders threatened the conquest of all the lands of Gondor north of the White Mountains. And if that were to happen, the downfall and destruction of the whole kingdom must soon follow. As is known in the histories, this peril was averted only by the aid of the Rohirrim, and to them Cirion, with great wisdom, granted all the northern lands, save Anorion, to be under their own rule and king, though in perpetual alliance with Gondor. There were no longer sufficient men in the realm to people the northward region, nor even to maintain in force the line of forts along the Anduin that had guarded its eastward boundary. Cirion gave long thought to this matter before he granted Calenardhon to the horsemen of the north, and he judged that its cession must change wholly the tradition of Isildur with regard to the hollow of Amon Anwar. To that place he brought the Lord of the Rohirrim, and there by the mound of Elendil he, with the greatest solemnity, took the oath of Eorl, and was answered by the oath of Cirion, confirming forever the alliance of the kingdoms of the Rohirrim and of Gondor. But when this was done, and Eorl had returned to the north to bring back all his people to their new dwelling, Cirion removed the tomb of Elendil, for he judged that the tradition of Isildur was now made void. The Hallow was no longer at the midpoint of the kingdom of the south, but on the borders of another realm. And moreover, the words, while the kingdom endures, refer to the kingdom as it was when Isildur spoke, after surveying its bounds and defining them. It was true that other parts of the kingdom had been lost since that day. Minas Ithil was in the hands of the Nazgul, and Ithilien was desolate, but Gondor had not relinquished its claim to them. Calanarthon it had resigned forever under oath. The casket, therefore, that Isildur had set within the mound, Cirion removed to the hallows of Minas Tirith. But the green mound remained as the memorial of a memorial. Nonetheless, even when it had become the site of a great beacon, the hill of Anwar was still a place of reverence to Gondor, and to the Rohirrim, who named it in their own tongue Halifirien, the Holy Mount. So now Elendil Vrondo, the last lord of Andunier, leader of the faithful, founder of the realms in exile, father of Isildur and Anarion, and ancestor of Aragorn Elessar, rests in the House of the Kings on Rath Dinan in Minas Tirith. And folks, that wraps it up for Mailbag Monday. If you have a question you'd like me to answer, please email it to bartleman@theprancingponypodcast.com. Let him know it's for today's Tolkien Times, and I'll get to it as soon as possible, with priority going to supporters of the show on Patreon. Speaking of which, please visit patreon.com/TolkienTimes to find out how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, become a part of my content council, listen to an extra episode every week, and more. Join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times for Tolkien Tuesday as we learn more about the professor himself. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Follow or subscribe in your podcast apps, and follow @Tolkien Times on all your social media. And finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.